Over its near 25 years of existence, Counter-Strike has been loved by fans both casual and professional across the world in many different regions. But recently, I was looking through the archives of old gaming stuff that, well, nobody asked for, and I stumbled upon a very interesting legal dispute and subsequent incident that really hasn't been brought up much in the community. An incident that would not only cost Counter-Strike its foothold in Asia, but also almost killed Steam and Valve in the process. So today we'll be taking a look at the PC Bang incident, as well as the complicated series of events leading up to it, and the ending that could have been much, much worse. Now, this is a bit of a complex one, so grab some popcorn, and as always, timestamps are provided for the video, so feel free to skip around to whatever interests you. But let's get into the history behind this. So obviously nowadays we have the most recent Counter-Strike 2, a new engine with updated graphics, some new and tweaked mechanics, and all the other goodies that come with that. But today's story goes back in time, long before CS2, CSGO, and even a bit further than CSS. So let's go back in time to around mid-2002, near the era of Counter-Strike 1.5. Back then, you basically had two ways of getting your hands on CS. Well, legally, that is. The first option was the Counter-Strike mod itself, which required ownership and installation of the original Half-Life, and the second option you had was to purchase the retail edition titled Half-Life Counter-Strike, which was the commercially sold physical copy that came packaged with both games in one. Unfortunately, I don't have this one, but I do have Condition 0. Alongside each of these versions, Valve would offer any official support, changes, and updates for both versions via Sierra Entertainment's website WON.net, which stands for World Opponent Network. But Valve had a plan to streamline the process, breaking away from this method. With the release of the next version of CS and any subsequent updates for it, they would only be available exclusively on their upcoming platform titled Steam, stopping support through the WON.net website in the process. Now, we all know what Steam is, and it was obviously pretty big for PC gaming as a whole. Not only would it streamline the process of updating and playing Counter-Strike, it would also allow players a centralized way to buy, download, and update games, as well as play with their friends and meet new people. But although Steam could be seen as a net positive for many PC gamers, it wasn't exactly the case for many players in some other parts of the world. As Steam grew even more in popularity, there was another problem on the horizon: internet cafes. Remember those? Yeah, me either. But look, if you live in North America like I do, you've most likely heard of them, you may have even seen them at some point, but let's be honest, you've probably never been to one before. But in many other regions such as Eastern Europe and Asia, home computers and internet service weren't always as accessible, especially in the early 2000s. These internet cafes provided a place for people to use a computer for basic tasks affordably, and more specifically, LAN or gaming centers provided a social space to meet and play games together with others. Okay, so how does this all tie into the CS community in the Asia-Pacific region? Well, the origins of the issues mostly started in South Korea. For reference here, these internet cafes specific to gaming are often called PC Bangs in South Korea. They offered an area for people to play games for a low hourly fee. Now, home PCs and internet weren't exactly uncommon in South Korea back then, but PC Bangs were more of a social experience for people. Instead of gaming at home, people would rather go out to these areas to play with others in person. At the time, the most popular games in South Korea were StarCraft and, of course, Counter-Strike. With both games being quite competitive, their communities thrived with many mini tournaments and championships often being held at these LAN centers. Now, an important thing to note was how the sale of Counter-Strike in South Korea was handled at the time. Vivendi Universal was the company responsible for distribution of Half-Life and Counter-Strike in commercial retail. Vivendi also owned and operated Sierra Entertainment, who of course worked with Valve in publishing their titles at the time, and also owned the aforementioned WON.net website for the updates and support to Counter-Strike. But with the release of CS 1.6 on Steam exclusively, Valve made it clear that they would no longer provide updates and support through this website. And so begins the rather complex legal dispute over not only the future of Counter-Strike, but also for Steam and even Valve as a whole. In August of 2002, Valve would launch a copyright infringement lawsuit against Vivendi and Sierra Entertainment for continuing to distribute the unsupported physical copies of Counter-Strike to internet cafes across the world. Sierra had a contract with Valve for publishing and distribution of their games from 1997 until the year 2001, when a new contract was created that allowed Valve back most of its rights for digital distribution. See, I said it was complex. Okay, so let me sum it up. Valve owned Half-Life and Counter-Strike, while Vivendi owned Sierra Entertainment, who had most of the publishing and distribution rights for Valve's titles up until 2001 with the new contract. And by continuing to distribute CS to these internet cafes outside of Steam, Sierra was technically breaching their new contract with Valve. Okay, so I hope that simplifies it a little bit. Vivendi and Sierra of course would countersue, and get this, they sought not only the distribution rights to the entire Half-Life IP, but also a ruling that would prevent Valve from using Steam to distribute any of their past or future Half-Life or Counter-Strike titles. I don't think I even need to discuss the legal outcome of this, but unsurprisingly in 2004, Valve would win their lawsuit, being awarded $2.3 million in damages, and of course the countersuit by Vivendi and Sierra was subsequently dismissed. Instead, Valve would reach an agreement in 2005 to continue with the distribution of their games with Electronic Arts instead. In the end, interestingly enough, Vivendi would be bought out by Activision Blizzard in July of 2008, which started yet another lawsuit now between Valve and Activision Blizzard, as at the time of their merge, Vivendi still owed Valve over $400,000. The outcome here was that Counter-Strike was no longer being distributed in retail and only over Steam. Having Steam on your PC, of course, was fine, but for an internet cafe, there are many security concerns to arise from this, with having multiple users log into their personal accounts on the same public computer and Wi-Fi and all that. So Valve would start a program for internet cafes that allowed them to pay a monthly fee for each computer to have access to a whole library of games on Steam, including Counter-Strike. Now, we don't have exact numbers here, but from what I could find, it was around $15 per month per PC, but I can't confirm these results exactly. This would raise the hourly rates of these LAN centers, which rapidly killed Counter-Strike's popularity not just in South Korea, but across most of the Asia-Pacific region. To put it simply, players just couldn't justify paying the extra fees to continue playing Counter-Strike when there were other, much more affordable options available. And so, Counter-Strike's budding pro scene in Asia at the time dried up pretty quickly, leaving most of them to move over to other competitive games like StarCraft or another FPS title. One of these titles being Crossfire, which still holds a very significant player base to this day, in fact being one of the most popular and profitable FPS games of all time. Now, I won't get too much into details about Crossfire, as that could be a whole other video on my channel in the future. Let me know if that's something I should actually do. So in the end, CS 1.6 lost a majority of its Asia-Pacific player base simply due to the greed of the publishing and distribution companies. Of course, it's not all bad now, as Steam has exploded in popularity in the past decade, and with the Chinese-specific version of CSGO being released in 2018, Counter-Strike is now huge again in the Asian region. But it is interesting to think what would have happened had the lawsuit gone a different way for Valve, as Counter-Strike, Steam, and, well, Valve as a company as we know them, may not have ever gone any further, and who knows what gaming as a whole would have looked like today without them.